Hey all, my name is Veladam01 and welcome back to the next episode of Cities Skylines East of the Curtain, my former Eastern Bloc inspired city building series. Sorry that there was no episode for like 6 months or I don't know how long. I had a lot of things to do in the background. For example, I had to finish my thesis and prepare for my final exams. By the way, you would not guess what the topic of my thesis was. Writing a program that simulates the development of a city where the user could specify the input parameters like how big it is, size of the map and the initial citizen count, and how many years should it simulate, then just click on the start button and see the magic happening. I think you all know where the idea came from. I cannot even deny it, that maybe I played too much Cities Skylines, and yes, basically Cities Skylines inspired the topic of my thesis. Anyway, after I have successfully defended my thesis and completed my final exams, I have tried to return to make videos again, but it just didn't work. I tried to record new episodes many times, just to find out that it was ugly what I have built, and I have just deleted the footage and the save games and tried to build it and re-record it again and again, only to always find myself with the same problem again, and I was just basically caught in this loop. So I have completely gave up on this idea for like months. But even during these months, I still continued following the Skyline scene from the background. For example, I kept on watching the series and videos and live streams on YouTube from Cities Skylines creators. I kept on following the workshop, subscribing assets and keeping my mod collection up to date. And I also kept on following the news about Cities 2. I haven't played it yet, haven't even bought it yet since it came out, but seeing what is happening around with that game, which is no comment by the way, I don't even have plans to buy it for now, or until at least there is a proper sale for it on Steam, so until then I will just stick to Cities 1. There were also some upgrades in my computer. My old GPU, Gigabyte 1660 Super, got replaced by a Zephyr Radeon 6700 XT, so my PC is now officially a full AMD rig. Yes, I am aware that AMD GPUs used to have driver issues or be bad at video encoding, but what I have heard that AMD managed to fix the GPU encoding in their cards, so consider this episode as a test to see how it will behave during heavier workloads like recording or rendering and video encoding. So let's see now how it will turn out. In the last episode I have built a big modern style industrial area in this part of the city, and what I did off camera is I moved a factory from the background to here to the side of the river because I think it is actually looking better here instead of where it originally was. And I also replaced another factory with different buildings from the DDR prefab warehouse pack made by Meister Monis. So now that lot looks more like a storage place than the ugly mess that have been originally there. And by the way, this industrial area also caused some issues for me in the city, as it created a lot of unfilled jobs, especially these bad boys. They needed, I think, maybe 1,000 workers per piece, and I had 5 of them placed here in this area. So what I had to do is I had to convert these big bad boys into procedural objects, and I also had to replace the distribution centers to, well, basically for the same asset but with the different AI. Now they are Industries DLC warehouse assets, and not only they need less workers than the ploppable Rico ones, but they can also store materials. And I also hope that because of this, the companies here in this district will prefer ordering their needed things from the local warehouses instead of importing them from the outside connection, and by doing so, making this industrial district a little bit more efficient. But since we still have huge housing demand in the city because workers would like to move into the city to work here in this industrial district, what I would like to build in this episode is some kind of residential expansion with some unified design suburban row houses, but not the prefabs. So let me just jump straight into Google Earth and show you what I am talking about. So first here we are in Angyalföld, Budapest at the junction of Göncöl utca and Fiastyúk utca. Actually, I am going to show you 5 locations in this video on Google Earth where I have taken inspiration from for this episode I mean. You can see that here at the first location there is a nice kind of uniform looking housing area with this kind of Neubau block like row house buildings between the prefabs and the socialist realist houses. Let me also jump into Street View and show you around in this area. On the left side of this street there are these houses that I am talking about and taken inspirations, but the other side of the road is also not bad with these socialist realist houses. You would see there are shops and other services here like hairdressers. And yes, maybe this area looks kinda rundown, but it still looks okay for what I would like to build. And by the way, yes, you see it, right? This is an actual high voltage power line here in the middle of the street, straight next to the residential area, because why not? But this is something that I'm going to exclude from my city for now. And now here we are on the other side of the Danube. We are still in Budapest in Aquincum or Kaszásdőlő, or I don't know what this place is actually called because the border between these two places are actually unclear where it is actually going. The interesting part here is next to the railway tracks at Szentendrei út in the streets behind the sound barrier. Here you can see the classic prefabs, but there are also these kind of low-rise buildings here. First, there is this row house, which is actually a prefab by the way, with tilted roof and refurbished outlook, and it is hardly visible unless you look at the right part of the house where the prefab elements can still be seen. But let's move a few streets away and you would see these. I think these here are definitely not prefabs, but nice two-story houses with some small alleyways between them, where if you go inside you will find a dead end with a kind of a cul-de-sac ending, and these small, low-rise, maybe wooden or I don't know, row houses for families. It is looking kind of well kept, and if you look around you can see the tall prefabs in the background and also a smokestack here above them, which is the smokestack of a power plant nearby. Now let's move to the southern part of Budapest where Csepel and Albertfalva can be found. First we go to Albertfalva where you could see these small, maybe built in the 30s or 40s or 50s row houses here in somewhat long rows, which you can see if the prefab does not cover them on the screen. Jumping into Street View shows you what I really like about this place, that there is the big prefab on the one side of the street, while on the other side there are these small houses. Then at the crossroad there are these buildings with the same style, but they are 2 floors here. Then looking in the direction where I am circling with my cursor, there is a main road there where a general store and a bus and a tram stop can be found, providing services for the area. And in another street then you can see the smaller row houses again, but this time on both sides, the prefab behind them, and a lot of these utility poles and power lines all around, making this area feel like more like a village or something. And to be honest, this area kind of feels similar to what have been built by Akuras in episode 35 of his Altengrad city, where he called this type of area Garten City or Gartenstadt in German. Now also look at Csepel in Teleputza, where you could see kind of a similar style worker barrack-like houses, but this time they were built from bricks. As you look around in Google Earth, you could see these nice suburban houses with nice and well-kept gardens. I kinda like that you can see a water tower peeking out behind the buildings. This is the Csepel water tower, and fun fact, it is available on the workshop for download made by Joppy the Bear, the same creator who made the Have suburban trains that I use in my city. Now a few blocks away at the I don't know what the name of this street, you can find the same style houses, but when I tried to get a better footage of them, from this side it was so overgrown that the actual buildings were not even visible, so I also tried it from the other street where the situation was kind of the same. Then I noticed this, and I was just like, what the fuck? Are these fucking railroad tracks here? And yes, they were unused rail tracks here in this street. Then I got curious and tried to follow them, trying to find out what are these tracks and where they are leading, but one end of the street just ends in a dead end with an overgrown area. You could see that actually some kind of vegetation grows in the middle of the tracks, while on the other side, on the other end, it just goes behind the gate into some kind of factory yard which seems kind of abandoned or something. While I was looking around to trace these rail tracks, I have also stumbled upon this place. It has kinda the same houses that we saw in Albertfalva, and I kinda like this narrow alleyway where on one side there are these low-rise houses, while on the other side there is the back wall of an industrial area, and the whole alley is just ending in a fucking forest. Bro, what the fuck is this place? And the last footage I'ma show you from Google Earth is from Szombathely, a city in West Hungary. This footage actually shows you two locations in the city. The first is here at Bárdosi Németh János utca, where you can find these row houses, the typical well-kept suburban gardens and vegetations. And they also have these garages here on the street. And to be honest, this area is just feeling a nice area to live. And you could see that I accidentally jumped to Street View twice while showing you this area because the different colors of the rooftops confused me, and I was thinking that actually two different styles of buildings were mixed here. Then I moved on to the second location, also in Szombathely, but on the other side of the city in Jászai Mari utca and the surrounding area. There you will see that the houses are a bit bigger than being just the small one household houses, but they seem to be built like they are all following some kind of a pattern. And of course, some prefabs can be seen towering over in the background. Obviously, there are many more locations written in my TXT file where I wanted to take inspiration for this episode and wanted to make Google Earth footage to show you about them, but for one, I couldn't take a footage because there was no street view about it, and it didn't even have this 3D rendering on Google Earth, while the other place just looked like a fucking ghetto, so I just decided that I won't make a footage of them. And this is what I want to do in this episode, so let's jump into the game and let's build these houses for the people. So, here is the phase 1 of today's residential expansion. Originally, I planned 3 phases for this episode, but decided to make the third phase in a different time, in one of the next videos, as I think that it could be a separate episode by the topic, which is fixing that part of the city. Or you know what, even better, maybe it can be just a live stream like I have already done it sometimes before. So first, you can see me removing this forest here. Don't worry, later I will plant it back and prepare the street network for the expansion. Also, I didn't build up every lot here. For example, you would see that I left the area between the river and the main road empty and built nothing there. Before I placed any building, I just placed some hedges. And why, you might ask? I did it just to mark out the property boundaries, and you can already tell what the design is behind this area, the residential area, by just looking at these hedges, that every property would be the same 6x4 size large. This specific area here near the trolleybus depot would be inspired by the one that I showed you in Chapel in the street view footage, where I would build these detached row houses. For this part I used these assets from the European Suburban DLC made by Avanya, and you would see that I converted them to procedural objects so I could get rid of the props and trees and tweak them a bit, like playing with the colors and the variations and also clipping them together. In contrast with the real life location, you could see that in this entire episode I tried to use these flat plaster like wall versions of the asset and try to avoid using the brick wall texture because this is Central Europe and the former Eastern Bloc, and I just didn't want the area look like England. So as I told you, I just clipped 2 buildings together for one lot, as it could be seen on the footage, and I copied them all around the area, trying to balance between being repetitive but also making some kind of variety. So I mostly played with the color combinations and also the rooftop color combinations. And to break up the grid, you would also see that at some corners I also made these small places with dog parks, playgrounds or small parks for the residents. To decorate, I first made these driveways or front gardens using these decals like the base game tile decals or the zoo, park and nature reserve tiles from Park Life and the sand and bluestone pavers from the Plazas and Promenades DLC. And for trying to recreate the suburban feeling of the area, I also planted a lot of trees, which were all part of the PNP update, you know, the free update that added these kind of trees into the base game. So they are basically vanilla assets. To populate the area, you will see that I use the low-res PO cube to clip inside the buildings, so not to be just some useless object on the map, but be actually functional things with households where people can actually live. And I also did some road and pedestrian network tweaks, like connecting up the area to the main road with a pedestrian street from the PNP DLC, and I also fixed up the overpass next to this area for the pedestrians with some PO magicry and with some invisible paths in order to function properly. And of course I have replanted the forests that have been here in the beginning of the episode. So to be honest, for this project here I use mostly vanilla assets, and the only things that are non-vanilla are the roads, the hedges, and some of the parks I placed down in the neighborhood. And of course the PO residential cubes to make the buildings work as intended. And here we are at phase 2, and it seems kinda ironic that I wanted to build housing for the workers working in the industry, yet I built their housing on the completely other side of the city, far away from the actual industrial area. But what I originally wanted to do is build this residential expansion in this episode here, then a highway expansion for which I would like to also make some custom network assets with the road builder mod. Then on the other side of the highway another industrial area in the next few episodes, but as I told you earlier, these next episodes could also be live streams. And maybe it won't be just an industrial area, as I could also build another outskirts retail park just like in episode 3 next to the yet to be built industrial area. Anyway, this residential area here is kinda inspired by the one that I showed you in Albertfalva, and also the Garden City episode of Akrua's Altengrad series. And for some reason I also quite like when you could see these big prefab blocks standing behind the low-res and family house areas in the background. In this particular footage I used the EU LD13 asset, also from the EU Suburbia DLC made by Avanya, and it comes right in two sizes, a ground floor only variant and one that has an upper level too. I basically did the same with these assets, converting them into PO, and since they don't conform to the grid boundaries, I had to tweak them with PO to make them do that. So after completing the steps that I had to do in this phase 2, like building the street network, marking out the property boundaries and setting up my palette, I started to build the actual neighborhood itself. What I did is I have just repeated the same method that I did in phase 1 and clipped some of these buildings together, making them these longer row houses. Well, actually not all buildings are the same size, because I tried to see how it would look like if the buildings on the middle are a bit longer than the buildings on the edges, just to spike up the variety, and to be honest I kinda like that, so I kept it and applied the design when copy pasting the buildings to make this neighborhood. For decorating the area I basically used the same technique than in phase 1. I basically did the same, so I don't even know why I left this in the video. Maybe just to have some footage I can do some commentary over it. All difference was that I had to extend some of these garden tiles because some buildings are bigger and they couldn't fit them. And I also had to introduce some planter props when copy pasting the trees all around. Some planters from vanilla, some planters from the workshop to make the trees nicer and not just grow out from the garden tiles. And also some vanilla planters even had some flowers planted in them, so combining them with some trees, they made really nice front gardens. To be honest, this neighborhood ended up more like some worker barracks, but that was actually the goal of this episode. And to be clear, I think these are not the socialist worker barracks, but they are from even before socialism. And I said that I would not like to build prefabs for this project, yet you could see me building some of them at the end of the episode. Don't worry, I only built them just to have something in the background and not just the big blue empty sky. And also because I told you that for some reason I really like when they can be seen maybe from your backyard garden, or they are just there just like in Half-Life 2, as a decoration, adding to the atmosphere in an unreachable out-of-bounds area. Small notice here, by the way, the same applies to industrial areas too. And this is quite ironic, to be honest, because first, here in this game they are not out of bounds but part of the city, and second, it turned out that I planted so many trees during decoration that when you go and look around in first person view from the street level, you could only see the trees and barely see the prefabs in the background I built especially for this purpose, but never mind. And here are some cinematics at the end about what I have built in this episode. Hope you all liked it. If you want to be kept updated about what is going on with me, or just want to see some previous screenshots about episodes before they get released, or just want to know when the next episodes are coming, just follow me on Twitter, which is now had become just X at Veladam01. Thanks for watching, see you later, goodbye.